A warm welcome, first of all, to our second round of panelists here. I'll let them give themselves just a quick introduction, and I'll preface this by saying we just talked about kind of the top of that funnel, about the innovation policy ecosystem, the big chunky pieces of the tax credits and various other parts that make that system work. And now we'll go down and talk about really getting into the details of how does this working really on the ground for companies and ecosystems that are trying to build. So with that said, I'll let Kate introduce herself first.
So I'm Kate Riley, CEO of i3 Concepts. We're building a mobile drug testing platform, so a life sciences hardware company.
I'm Raymond Chik. Today I'm wearing, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Wearing the hat for Venture Lab. I'm a mentor at Venture Lab and also a part of the Hardtech investor network. That's my moonlighting work. My daytime job is a entrepreneur in the semiconductor business. I have a 6-year-old startup called Untether AI. We make AI chips.
I'm the president of Canada. We're a not-for-profit corporation that's based in Alberta. I work out of Ottawa, and we're here to support the deep tech ecosystem.
So welcome to all of you. And my first question is for, on the entrepreneur side, and Marie, from your kind of long experience, in and around the sector as well. When you go talk to investors and say, I'm a deep tech or semiconductor startup in Canada, please give me money, how does that go? And what's your pitch on why this is a good idea?
Well, yeah, being in the semiconductor industry for 30 years, and I've been doing startup for my last 20. It's not easy to raise money for these type of hard tech and deep tech companies. And in fact, Untether AI, which is my 6-year-old startup, we had to raise our first round in the States. And that's where they, in the Silicon Valley, they understand the industry. And the first money came in was Intel Capital, which is corporate VC. And so we didn't need to explain too much in terms of what our technologies are and what we're trying to do. And they basically just, okay, this is a bit of money, go do it. And so in that case, we're lucky in the sense that we caught attention of a corporate VC that understood what we're doing. And that really kickstarted the whole fundraising process. And a lot of our investors in Untether AI are US investors. And we do have Radical Ventures and also CPP in the later rounds. But initially, the initial Kickstarter was a US venture. But I do have to add that before that, Untether AI was spun off from a previous company called Capic Integration. And that was an unfunded, bootstrapped semiconductor business. So it can be done if you, depending on which vertical segment you are positioning yourself in. Untether AI positioned itself to be a fabless chip company, like an NVIDIA and Qualcomm and all that. And before that, Capic was more a services IP company, which we didn't need a lot of large capital to start. Basically, laptop, some brain power, and some money to buy tools. Those are expensive too. So we were able to bootstrap ourselves to a stage where we attempted to do multiple spin-offs with failures until Untether AI got started. And then we've spun up another company, I'm not going to say too much about it, and then now I'm doing a stealthy startup, again, a spin-off from Capic. So I'm not going to talk too much about that.
Sure.
I'd like to say that, I like to talk about de-risking investments. And with my white hair, I've been around when we started semiconductor prototyping in Canada, saying we need to have that capacity so that we can feed the system with prototypes, low volume manufacturing, and so on. And that, again, has happened with biomanufacturing during COVID. And I'm very excited about that because I think that's how you de-risk, is having a capacity for manufacturing in Canada. And I hope that also feeds into the deep tech as we have the collision between emerging technologies, which require patient investments and long-term investment in R&D, and then sectors, well-established sectors, to have that innovation. There are key pieces that play that very important role.
And Kate, on your side?
In Hardtech, speaking to investors, we find that it's very much an American opportunity. Oops. Sure. Hardtech is up the risk curve, and Canada is usually down the risk curve. And so, oops, I might have covered here. That the appetite for investors in a hardtech play is often a little bit more minimal, or that we find appetite in the early stage where we are still getting support from groups like SR&ED, and you're getting really good leverage on your dollars. But as a hardtech play is still in its risk territory, but on a development side, on inventory, on commercialization, we find that the capital needs grow and the risk tolerance falls away because the government support kind of falls away as well. So I've been finding that it's very much an American investor base that's really keen on that sort of commercialization side.
So that's an interesting point, and I think you're seeing the American investors, I think, perhaps have a better understanding of like the timelines and also probably deeper pockets. I'm curious, what the kind of are there information gaps, or do they not understand the sector well? Is there a need for kind of more expertise at that level, or is this a piece that is perhaps like a self-solving problem as the industry kind of matures in Canada?
I don't know if it's a self-solving problem. I think everything goes back to risk and risk tolerance, and so it's a bit of a cultural difference. Usually the money that we're finding from the US has come from people that have been successful in higher risk ventures and are looking to play that game again. In Canada, we tend to bias more towards, dividend yielding stocks, revenue generating companies, anything that doesn't have that binary risk outcome potential. And so I don't know that there's an information gap. I think that the culture can be influenced by incentives. It can be influenced by things like tax treatments and by matching programs. But it's very much a cultural difference as opposed to sort of an information difference.
Yeah. Raymond and Maddie, any thoughts on that?
Well, actually, I do. Regarding the information gap, I actually do think that, at least in my industry, which is semiconductor industry, not a lot of people understand industry. And therefore, it's hard for them to put early money in, especially for angel investors. My experience with working with angel groups are whenever there's really deep tech, especially semiconductor related, they just don't understand. I tended to play the role of, hey, these guys are doing this and this guy's doing that, and trying to do an explanation. So, and that actually leads to my involvement with Venture Lab's Hardtech Investor Network. So the objective of doing that is to pull together a bunch of investors, from angel investor to institutional VCs to private equities and whatever. We're not limiting to angel investors, just to pull together people who are interested in investing in hard tech, deep tech, but they might not quite have the knowledge to invest in those companies. And people like myself, who has been in the semiconductor industry for 30 years, who can help explain, educate, and also through the Venture Lab ecosystem, the advisor, they can actually help doing due diligence and whatnot. So we're trying to create that to help at least early stage or even later stage investment into hard tech companies. And to your point of investors from the US, they might be more knowledgeable. They have entrepreneurs who have done it, exited, and poured back money in. We need more of that in Canada, especially for the semiconductor industry where I'm at. I haven't seen a lot of successful entrepreneur exit yet. There are some. They're starting to come together because I've been in the whole environment for that many years. Only the past few years, I've seen very successful exits from some of my colleagues. And those are the people we need to come back to the ecosystem and invest and build more companies and more successful entrepreneur exit and keep on investing. So we need to create that entrepreneur and investor ecosystem. It's how Silicon Valley got started.
I think we're partly the victim of our geography. I find that the system is very siloed. So you go, certain provinces are much better than others in creating vibrant ecosystems. And then, why isn't it replicated across the country? Well, there's no national strategy. And the provinces do their own thing. If you're in emerging technology, you're asked, what's your application? What's your sector? Well, that can be used in all sectors, not the right answer, right? So what I like about deep tech is that you have that problem focus. Here's what we're trying to solve, and we'll bring the right technologies to it and the right sectors. But it's still breaking down all those barriers that are there between provinces. And there was a great example at a Research Money conference of the gaming industry in Quebec, where it was like Hollywood for gaming. But the Quebec companies were part of the supply chain and so on. And they said, why are we Hollywood when we could be Silicon Valley? And so they took IP seriously, and now they're making that transition into, here's the gaming industry that we want. And I think that's great, that evolution, right? And that's what we're trying to do in supporting the ecosystem and saying, okay, how do we have anchor companies, but how do we grow into something that's more than just being the Hollywood, but the Silicon Valley?
So Dan talked earlier about how the investment sort of focus has moved to later stages, and I know deep tech, you're often working on much longer timelines to commercialization than a lot of other industries. So how has that affected you, kind of as a part A of this question? And the part B is, do you think, we talked a bit about, do investors understand this industry? Does government understand this industry and what's involved there? Kate, feel free to take that one first.
I'm going to go with Joe. So I don't play as much in the deep tech space. We are more of a pure life sciences hardware. So I won't say that our challenges are as significant as you'll find in the deep tech, where they have still longer pathways to market. But any hardware company has a longer pathway to revenue to market than you'll find in any kind of software technology. And I think tech gets bucketed into this one category in government's mind, where they're like, we're going to support tech as long as they have $500,000 a year of revenue. And I think the challenge that we're finding is that when you have a hardware company, you're very capital intensive in your pre-revenue phase, but then as soon as you hit revenue, you don't need as much support, if any, at all. That really comes through on the other side. And I think one of the challenges that government's not seeing is that it's spending a lot of public dollars on that technology development phase, the R&D side, through the SR&ED and through other programs. And it loses all that money and all that investment as soon as that company leaves the country. And so you've poured all of your investment in with no retention of the value that comes out on the other side. It's actually the commercialization where you make your money. And when the Canadian government doesn't incentivize companies to actually commercialize in Canada, they're doing a great job of getting companies to innovate in Canada, to do that R&D in Canada, but then to actually make the money while you're still here, they practically shuttle us out the door. And that's where I think government doesn't really understand how hardware companies work or how the monetization of these companies work when it set up their policies. And a few tweaks could go a long way to keeping companies here. Like our company is still in Canada. I have a lot of pressure from stakeholders. I have a lot of pressure from stakeholders to start a U.S. corp right now, especially the day the federal budget dropped. That was a really busy phone call there. But there's a lot that can be done, like little small things that won't require a lot of changes from the federal government that would help a lot for us to be realizing the benefits of all of that investment in the early stages, but for the Canadian ecosystem afterwards.
Right. Anything from you folks on that?
I don't know about what government can do, but I can share one, not sure if that's misconception, maybe that's not a good word, but you mentioned hardware companies tend to take a much longer time to commercialization and therefore the return. But I can share one of my previous experience at my previous company, Capic Integration. We actually were profitable right at time zero because we did not invest in capital-intensive investment into building a product. We focused on engaging customer right at the outset to find a lead customer who fund us to develop the project for them. So we started that way. We retained IP and we shared IP, a sort of licensing deal we created. So that allowed us to use the IP that we developed in our first project into using in the subsequent project. So we started off by actually immediately going out to customers to provide design services and IP development. And then later on, as we as we interacted with different customers, different vertical in my particular industry, then we try to find the particular product that we wanted to build, because we already have some understanding of working in this area and understand the market. So we have a much better case to spin off a product operation, which is what we did with Untether AI. So in my particular example, you can actually build a hardware company without capital for a while. And then once you're mature enough, you take this particular idea out and raise money. That would be a little easier, if you will. That's my experience.
I have some experience. We organize Quantum Days, which is a conference for all the quantum technologists across the country. We've done that for 4 years. But what we tried to do from the very start was to have industry, venture capitalists at the conference. And that's, you take quantum, you say, oh, it's going to take 20 years to get a quantum computer. Well, that's too long. What's the low-lying fruit in that emerging technology? But having end-use cases is really important, and involving that community, which is, I must say, for a lot of the universities that are involved in development of emerging technologies, they don't understand that community. It's like, night and day. Why would I interact with them? But it's so important, because you could spend years developing an application which you think is the best thing since sliced bread, and it's not, right? So you've wasted, not only money, but a lot of energy. And so having the coalition of these communities together from the very start, I think, is so important. And we're trying to do that in quantum. Having a national strategy does help, because the government does want to see return on investment on its $350 million. And I think that's the role that the government can play too, is giving a framework, but saying from the very start, you know what, you have to pay attention to this. And I've been in the advanced materials field for a long time in semiconductors, and even when you had that laser focus on a material and its application in electronics, it still took 12 years. Too much time. And now we're accelerating new materials fast, thanks to robotics, AI, and so on. But we will still have to integrate those materials into circuitry and so on. And that takes time. So having mechanisms like venture labs, for example, where you can design, build, test quickly is also a very important part of the ecosystem, and should be replicated across the country.
So in our earlier conversation about SR&ED, Dan brought up the point that tools like a patent box would work well for certain industries where it's really easy to kind of tie a one-to-one between a dollar in and a patent. That kind of makes me think, when you're talking about all of this, are there pieces, to bring it back a little bit to the tax system, are there pieces around SR&ED or other government programming that might work kind of reasonably well at a general application level, but work much or appreciably worse for hard tech or hardware in general?
I wouldn't say that they are worse. I actually think that the programs that are in place help a lot with hard tech. IP, there's a lot of talk about IP right now and supporting the IP development. I think there's a few different programs that have come up recently, and they're nice to have. I wouldn't view those ones as being the real killers the real game changers for us, though, because IP is really not the hard part. Mm-hmm. IP is important. We need to have it. It needs to be properly protected, but it's not challenging. Developing the IT and the contracts. I used to be an IP lawyer, so I'm not saying this out of as somebody who doesn't recognize the value of IP. It's just not what is difficult about taking a company and making it a reality. Mm-hmm. And so it's great to have supports on those sides, but I think there's still too much focus on that really, really early stage of creating the IP and the R&D that goes into that, and not enough focus on what do you do with that IP. And I think that's where we would get a lot more help.
Yeah, sorry if I may.
Yep.
Regarding the IP thing, in deep tech, IP is important to support the business, and I agree that it's kind of a bonus if that can be helped. It's not a huge amount of money, but it still helps. So I actually would welcome if they can, if there's a program that actually support companies that actually file patents and that process, especially in your very early stage, and you don't, if you're shoestring budget and you want to file a patent, but then okay, that cost me $20,000, so I better not do it, and that kind of stuff. So if you can get some subsidy on there, that would be helpful. The other thing about SR&ED, though, okay, now you had discussed about your experience too and my experience too, is shreddable. What are shreddable? The most biggest piece of shreddable money, at least from my experience, is basically human resources, engineering power, engineering salaries, people who are doing the research. And a lot of times, we outsource our engineering to offshore. In my case, I've outsourced a lot of engineering into India. And in those cases, SR&ED are not covered, even though we did benefit from that interaction. So I wonder if they're going to open up SR&ED to allow.
It's an interesting point because we're a very global community when it comes to growing a business, and we have a lot of activities that are offshore as well. A lot of our research and development is done in Scotland. And that's very cost intensive, and we're still getting the benefit in Canada of growing a company here that is benefiting from that IP development that's being done somewhere else, but having the inability to subsidize some of that cost. It does make it challenging too, even when you engage with a Canadian contractor, if they subcontract functions to an offshore organization, then that no longer is eligible either. And so having that sort of limitation, I totally understand the need to stimulate work being done in Canada, for sure. But if there was any way to demonstrate a need to go outside the country to serve a certain function and be able to qualify after demonstrating that you couldn't do it here, that would probably go a long way too.
Yeah, I think IP is important. And again, there is this sort of impatience with IP. You have to be patient when you have an IP portfolio, because it may take years before the value of the portfolio is what really propels you forward. And I think it needs to be supported financially by the government, because it's that the cost of maintaining that IP in the Canada and US and around the world can bloom astronomically. So I think it is an area of attention by the government.
So to tie things back a little bit here, so we've got, apologies for those of you kind of to my right who've been able to see this, we've got a beautiful view of the Peace Tower right there out the window. The heart of our democracy, heart of darkness, as some people might think, depending on your perspective. If there's one thing you could kind of, if you could walk up the street and kind of make folks, well, actually not in Center Block these days, obviously no one's in there, but in West Block, which we can't quite see. If you could make the folks who are over there making decisions understand kind of one thing about your company or your sector, what would that be?
Commercialization. The only thing I would say is please focus on commercialization supports, because that's how we keep the money that's already been invested by the federal government in the country, and we can actually grow it to an end goal that we all are after.
Raymond and Marie?
Yeah, I actually had the same word that I was going to say. But yeah, so commercialization, and Canada is good at basic research, R&D. There's lots of talented people in university, but we just haven't seen enough to the next step, bigger company, building a big company. There are no, well, at least from my industry, there's no big companies around that actually achieve the stage of where the US companies can achieve. And some of those companies did exist, but they got bought by US companies.
I would say, the critical challenges of our planet are such that we need big teams to attack these problems. For that, we need emerging tech and sectors. And we need to work together as large groups to solve these problems. And I think the problem itself, the critical challenges of the planet, people can relate to. And we see it every day. So having that would be my plea to them: invest in deep tech.
Yeah. If I can ask perhaps a final question, are we? Yeah. Okay, 5 minutes. Okay, we got a little bit of time then. So if I'm a cranky guy at the Department of Finance, and you come to me and you say, I want more support to commercialize, and that guy looks up from his abacus and he says, isn't that what profits are for? Like, isn't that at the end of the day, like, our job is to give you, good talent, good R&D support, but, when it comes to actually making a dollar, that's your shop. So what would you kind of push back on for that?
There's a reason why scaling rounds are the Series B, C, D. They're the reason why that's the large chunk of capital that companies have to go and raise. It actually costs a lot of money to commercialize effectively and to really scale your business. And so yes, profits are hopefully the positive outcome of that, but you have to invest a lot up front to be able to secure that growth and that commercialization. There's also that process of establishing your manufacturing capabilities, establishing your inventory, your logistics and supply chains. All of these things take time, they cost money, and they take skilled resources. And that's not the kind of activity that's eligible for any of these R&D supports or any of the programs that are in place to support intellectual property development. And so those are the huge investment pieces that require the tens of millions of dollars that you see companies going out to raise. That would be a huge help if we had incentives either to help with that capital raise here or to help support those types of activities that are taking place here.
Yeah. Raymond, anything on your side?
Not much to add to that because I'm experienced the same thing as a chip company. There's a lot other than the initial design investment to build your first prototype, your first product. There's a huge amount of, it's arguably 80% of the time you have to, it's after that of the capital would have to be support the manufacturing supply chain management and partnership and how do you manage them. Right now, at this point, as a smallish startup, we can't afford to manage all of that by ourselves. Basically, we have to go to a supply chain management company, which is usual in our industry, to do a one-stop shop, and that's more expensive. Mm-hmm. And that's, as I said, that is 50 to 80% of the effort and money that you have to spend in addition to your initial R&D and initial product development spending. So yeah, a lot of money needs to bring the company from initial startup through the growth stage to commercialization and revenue reaching. I mean, exponential revenue reaching.
Right. Marie, on your side, you raised a different thing, which is really kind of this more targeted sectoral support. So, this is a thing the government's played in various fields over the years. But if you had a piece of advice for the government on how to do it well in deep tech, what would it be?
Oh, interesting. Well, I think we have a playbook right now, which is quantum technologies, and Canada is very good at it. And we have a powerhouse in universities, and we have companies that are coming up, that are scaling up, and we need to support that. So SR&ED has received money from BDC and so on, and others. If we want to be world players, we want those companies to stay. And for that, they have to grow, and they have to scale up and stay in Canada. And they will also support a whole supply chain of other companies that will be around them, whether they're materials or other things. And so it's very interesting how it's playing out right now. And the companies that come to me say, we're very close to our first product on the market, and that's fairly quick, given when the strategy was put into place. But we have to realize that, again, I talk about patience, the development of materials that go in quantum technologies have taken place over more than 30 years. If we think about Nortel in Ottawa, the semiconductor materials that they were using and all that technology took decades in university, in companies. But Nortel is no more, but the companies that fed all of that are still here. And that, that's part of a rich ecosystem, and that's what we want to reproduce in a sense, having all of the players at different stages of their journey in commercialization.
So I thank you so much to all of our panelists. This has been a wonderful conversation, and thank you to the room for joining us for this conversation, kind of up and down the funnel from innovation strategies right down to filling out shred forms to cover some of those expenses. So let's give a big round of applause to our panel here.